Hey everybody, welcome to Sin to the Cross podcast. I am your host, Glenn Fisher, and today I am joined with Nicole Meyer. You may have seen her story all over the news. She's an incredible advocate and just been a great source for me lately as well to bounce stuff off. And I'm really keen to hear her story. How you going, Nicole?
Yeah, I'm doing great. Thank you.
Yeah. So I wanted to start with, if you don't mind, just talking a little bit about growing up prior to all of this. Know a little bit about you growing up.
So I grew up in a very sheltered home, very insulated. The world was literally my school, my home, and my community. There was nothing external to that. Absolutely zero external influence whatsoever. So all I knew was that. Unfortunately, I grew up in a severely abusive household. So my mother, extremely, extremely abusive, and my father also not a safe person. And that really created an environment of fear that is even impossible to describe, the level of fear that we grew up in to do anything wrong. So in essence, I was groomed to be a perfect child. I was brought up to be not one step out of place. All the punishments and the consequences were so severe, including very severe physical punishments as well.
I often think back to my own story, and I just want to say this because of what you just said, is that I believe I was pre-groomed uh, before being abused. And I think that that's what happens in that kind of living environment. Would you agree?
I agree, because we are so controlled and so terrified. All that is setting us up to then be a vulnerable target for a predator later on who sees our vulnerability that we don't even know we have because we are brought up in such strict and physically harmful conditions.
Yeah, you're used to not having a voice, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. God, you found your voice now, though, mate.
I have. Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, so let's start a little bit about, let's talk about, I've been trying to say this all day, Mal Khalifa? Mal Khalifa?
Malka Leifer.
Malcolm Lifer, righto. Sorry about that. I couldn't figure it out. But anyway, so let's talk a little bit about that. How this all come about. So you were in a school.
So I went to a female only school, being the way that my religion we were brought up in. And being only female, I had no interactions with males, no interaction with anyone other than my brothers and my father, who were male, growing up at all. And Malka Leifer was a female teacher who came to the school when I was in year 10, so when I was about 15 and a half, and who became, within a year or two, became the principal of the whole school, not just of year 11 and 12, which what she was originally brought out for.
Yeah, it's always the same odd story, right? A person in position of power.
Absolutely. And I do believe that she worked so hard to become principal of the whole school so that she had complete and utter control. Because many times people say to us, why didn't you come forward? And it's like, who to?
Yeah,
She was the top. All the teachers went to her, all the students went to her, all the student teachers went to her. She even had interactions with the kinder teachers. There was no one else to go to because she was the top, and she put herself very smartly in that position.
I often think too, while we're going through these things, that we don't quite know until later what's happening. It sort of starts off light and it grows and grows until we don't really understand that we have the power to have a voice. Our kids are better educated today, but back in your era, my era, we didn't have that same freedom.
Absolutely. And that's something I really can see with my own children, that my youngest, when he was in kinder, and he's now 13, came home and said to me that someone pulled down his pants in the bathroom, that he had the language to say that. And it wasn't malicious. It was kids being silly. But of course, I raised it and the school dealt with that appropriately. But the fact that as a 4-year-old, he could tell me that, that shows that my children are being brought up differently to how I was brought up.
And that's why your voice is so powerful, Nicole, is because, that we need to be able to teach parents today how to liaise with their children so that they are better informed and better able to articulate what's going on with them, about my body, my choice, what's right, inappropriate touching and all that kind of stuff. Yeah.
Absolutely. And I feel like a lot of times parents struggle because they don't want to traumatize their children, and they don't want their children to be too scared of what's out there. But there are age appropriate ways of talking to children from very young about autonomy over their own body, about being able to say no. I was never able to say no in my entire life. I still struggle with the word no. I'm still working on that in therapy.
Yeah.
And we are teaching our children, you have choices. We grew up not thinking we ever had a choice for anything at all. So I think even parents teaching that to children from very young, they have a choice to say no. And then, as they get older, teaching them names of body parts and what people can't touch and who they can talk to, who's considered a safe person in their lives, and giving them that power, because really knowledge is power. So if our children are knowledgeable, they are empowered. We can never stop abuse from happening in the world, but we can empower our children what to do if something happened to them or if they witness something happening to someone else.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the fears that I have in today's society is that so many children, although we're working on that now, have access to the internet and that kind of stuff, where they're almost desensitized to so many things that the things that are abnormal, that are minute, might not seem anything to them when they're seeing these bigger things happening online.
I agree. And then to counter that, I think parents have to be even more mindful about having more explicit conversations with their children. So the way my children are growing up is that they don't easily have access to internet. They don't have any online games that involve any kind of chatting. That's for my own safety, and that's also culturally. We don't have a TV at home. They don't have any gaming systems. So my older children have something called a dumb phone, which doesn't have any internet access, only has text and phone calls. But even then, children find a way around everything. So you still have to have those really explicit discussions. And my oldest went overseas to school. He's 18. And I had to look at my 18-year-old son and say, if something happens to you, and I had to give him an example, and I won't put it on here, this is what you need to do. And it doesn't mean I'll pull you out. It means I'll discuss with you about how to help you and what you want at that time. But these are the examples. And I gave him 3 very explicit examples of what can go on in an only boys dormitory. Not because I wanted to terrify him, because I needed to empower him with knowledge of what could happen and let him feel that he knows how to handle if I hope nothing will ever happen to him. But I needed him to have that knowledge going away from home for the first time.
Yeah, look, I often wonder if I had age-appropriate conversations with the right people at my age, if I would have been better equipped, A, to be able to know that I had the power to articulate my story to somebody else, a safe person, but more so to know what was happening, because I remember the first time I went through abuse, I knew that I'd been through a lot of pain and what was going on physically, but I didn't know, like, I didn't know what that was. I mean, what child at 9-year-old knows what that is, you know what I mean? So I agree. Let's move across to your story. Where does it all begin, Nicole?
It all begins as myself and my sisters, particularly, being extremely vulnerable, emotional neglect, physical harm, so much fear, violence happening in our home. And then this female principal coming in and just providing that love, that nurture, that care, the care factor of asking me how it was, seeing that something wasn't so okay, understanding if I stayed home, that meant I was being punished and I had to stay home and do chores. And she just took an interest in me and my life in a way that no one else ever had. And she started to become this person that I trusted. And I even brought this up in therapy recently because this time of year is all leading up to when the trial happened 3 years ago. So my body's still feeling it. Obviously, I need to process a lot of that still. So I will try and process more of that this year. Um, During the trial, I had so many memories of things that she had done. But at the same time, because the defense lawyer was trying to make the perpetrator come out to be someone nice, caring, that she didn't do something so bad, it reminded me also of, yes, that's how she was in the beginning. She was caring. She wasn't a monster. She didn't look like a monster. She was exactly all the nurturing and caring and everything she had. That's what covered up the abuse. And I wanted that. Which teenager who has never had love healthily given at home wouldn't want someone to care for them and think they're special?
That's a very interesting segue into what I wanted to talk about first, which is grooming. I like you, didn't I come from a broken home. We've come from violence, and then suddenly there's someone that's showing us attention. And at that age, I mean, any attention, you know what I mean? And so we don't recognize grooming. And I think it's something that needs to be talked about on a big scale a lot more. Do you recognize now as an adult looking back at the grooming techniques that she was using?
Yes, of course, in hindsight, I can see very clearly how her grooming started from the day she came, not just grooming the victims, grooming the community.
Yeah.
Everything that she did was calculating and very, very specific to the goal that she wanted, which was to be able to have access to teenage students to be able to abuse. And it's awful to look back and see that's what she was doing from the day she arrived. But there were grooming tactics for sure, that she crossed some boundaries in her grooming that other adults around should have picked up on and didn't. And if they had, and some of them did see something, then who knows how many victims would have been saved if it had been noticed straight away. So yes, my abuse story happened 20 years ago, 20 plus years ago when she first came. But at the same time, grooming, we still see stories now of childcare centres where someone is exposed and then other teachers say, we noticed this and we reported this and we noticed this. It's all there. You can notice. It's up to us as adults to notice, to protect the children around us.
I hold more frustration with those that knew and did nothing than those that did. I can put the ones that did, as you probably can, in a box. We're able to identify that. But those that knew and stand by and do nothing for either power, position, or for whatever reason, it leaves a horrible taste in the mouth, doesn't it? It makes one angry.
I do. I struggle a lot because I still live within the religious community, the same community that I grew up in and that I went to my schooling, and I had 10 years of teaching, my best years of teaching, obviously minus the abuse that happened during those years of teaching as well. I loved my students, but it's the same people that might have noticed and didn't say anything. And that's something I struggle with a lot because it's a betrayal on a different level. Like you say, the perpetrator can be put in a box, can be in prison. We know that they did what they did, but it's the bystander. It's the one that stayed silent. Silence enables. Yeah. And that's really why I've come out, even though it is such an outlier kind of thing to do for a religious person to speak up outside of the community while still remaining religious. It's because I know that there are so many that are shamed into silence, and I need to keep raising awareness and keep speaking about it so that every other victim that is shamed into silence does not feel alone and maybe has a strength to disclose, share with someone, report something they see, because that needs to change across the board, not just in my own community, of course.
You often see that in the family dynamics. Someone gets abused and the rest of the family are like, well, the problem's you speaking. If you just stop speaking about it, then the problem's not there. You know what I mean? And I imagine in your community where it's a lot bigger, a lot more intense, a lot more with the religious and all that kind of stuff, it'd be really difficult.
It is definitely. I mean, my sister in Manchester was threatened and got to us to please drop the case. And she passed away a couple of weeks later. And we always think it's connected to that stress, because to have two people from another country come visit her, threaten her livelihood and her children's marriage prospects and her family safety because they want us to drop the case is horrific. It would put anyone under a tremendous amount of stress. And she was not going to ask us to back down. She just wasn't. And it's just awful that she passed away literally within 2 weeks of them coming from a heart-related problem at the age of 39 with no heart-related issues before.
Yeah, I'm sorry to hear that, Nicole. That is horrible. I can't even put words to that. I don't want to take you down too much of a traumatic past, but I would like to hear a little bit about the actual abuse story. Or I mean, I don't have to articulate it all, but just how it kind of looked, how it started, and some of the things that happened there.
Yeah, absolutely. So basically, at the age of 15 and a half, she entered my life. I was in year 10. That year was just like I mentioned before, the crossing of the boundary where she just would touch someone and teachers didn't touch students, where she would be over friendly, over caring. I say over because obviously now I see it as grooming. Then it wasn't considered over. Yeah. And she really became involved in a lot of students' lives and community. We were in a building, like I said, only females. So she was like a role model kind of person that we looked up to. That is what we looked at as someone that we want to aspire to be like in like outlook in life, in wisdom about our faith and knowledge, and in ways of behaving, our values. And she was brought in to be that role model kind of person that you look up to. So it wasn't just students that looked up to her, it was community members as well. She filled that role very, very well. And she had a big family and a growing family because she had a couple of children while she was here in Australia. Then in year 11 and 12, the abuse just started to intensify. She would pull myself and other students as well out of class. She would lock her door. She would close the blind. And for an hour, her phone would be off the hook. And she would spend an hour abusing in her room. And then the student would go back to class. And it didn't just happen to me. It happened to others as well. And it would be at school camps. School camps, she would put herself in the same room as me and as other students potentially as well. I can't talk for them around school camps because I don't remember, but I know I shared a room with her and abuse would happen. It would be on school excursions on the bus. I have memories of her sitting next to me on the bus and still putting her hands on me, even though there were students sitting behind me, that her body covered like the crap between the seats. So they couldn't see through what she was doing. there were times where she would take me to like when I was driving, firstly teaching to drive her to feed her baby, but insist that I sit in a room with her while she feeds her baby because that's what she insisted that I do. So the abuse just continued and continued and continued. And when I finished year 12, the way it worked was year 11 and 12, I had a lot of extensive teacher training, particularly year 12. I did model lessons and I really saw that I had an affinity for teaching. So when I finished year 12, I went straight into the next year teaching, like straight away in the school I had just come out being a student from. So she wasn't now my teacher, she was now also my boss. So it means that she had a lot more access to me when I wasn't in class. She could use me a lot more. She could abuse me a lot more. And I wanted to do everything to please her because I was definitely a people pleaser, definitely a trauma response, definitely always trying to be good and do the right thing and do the best thing and be a perfectionist and always at her beck and call for everything. And that abuse continued, unfortunately, until I got married and pregnant. She did not stop. She had no boundaries. When I look back, I can think to myself that she owned me. She owned me. She knew my innocence. I had no idea what was happening to me. I had absolutely no language for it. I had absolutely no idea of my body parts. And it's something that I think the documentary that we've done seeks to hopefully try and educate, that abuse doesn't just suddenly stop when someone turns 18. And why does the law and the court say, oh, well, over 18, the jury can't understand, so we can't really talk about the abuse that happened after you got married because that wouldn't be believable in people's eyes. Well, this is my story and it's other stories, other people's stories as well. The abuse did continue after I got married and I was still teaching in the school. And then I got pregnant pretty quickly and the abuse still continued then. So she had.
Sorry, I don't think people understand the position of power position. You know what I mean? Like this is a long-term thing, you know, and like even though it's over 18, there's still that position of power. And the people-pleasing thing is the thing I struggle with the most to this very day. I mean, literally the conversation we were having on the phone yesterday where you're trying to help me through not doing that exact thing because it's almost ingrained within us, right?
Particularly like we both spoke about, like the pre-grooming that we had at home, and we were definitely people pleasing then, anything to avoid punishment and beatings and hurt, and then right into the arms of the perpetrator, who we then do the same thing again because we don't want to do anything that's going to cause them to hurt us and get angry and hurt us more. So it's that same behavior continuing. And she knew that. She knew I would never do anything to displease her because when I tried once, she took away a job from me, a secretarial job I had, and gave it to someone else. So she showed me her power. She was the cause of a broken engagement to the first person I was engaged to. She caused that engagement to be broken off 5 weeks before the wedding. She with my mother and another person. It wasn't just her, but she had a big influence into that. So the coercive control, anyone that understands anything about coercive control, she fits that mold right there as well, as many perpetrators do.
Yeah. So when was the switch? When was the moment, the light bulb moment where you went, you know, you realize what's going on and I'm going to do something about it?
I've shared this more recently, and it's not about doing something about it. It was more that I was pregnant with my oldest child, and when she lay down on top of me, and she was a big woman, and I was normal size, early pregnancy, I just thought in my very innocent mind that she's going to squash my unborn baby. And that's how innocent I still was.
Yeah.
And I just had this internal understanding, instinctive thing to protect my child, that I cannot be in the same room with her, that she can be in that position to do that action on my baby. The abuse didn't stop, but I had this awareness that my baby is the most important thing to me. And so the abuse still continued, but not that particular act. And my life continued. I had a child. I went back to work 6 weeks after he was born. She was still in my life. She came to visit me in hospital. She gave me a baby gift. I was completely dissociated, and which is what I tried to explain to the courts. Abuse was happening on the side, but I was still continuing life. It was completely a dissociated way of living because I was still functioning and still completely under her rule and her control. And it was actually my second sister who disclosed overseas in Israel to a social worker who called me to confirm, because my sister said, call my older sister, she can confirm. I confirmed, and that's when the ball started rolling.
I don't think people watching on will understand. Yeah, I know you will, and I know I do. Is how hard it is actually to speak up against somebody who we've built these long-term relationships with. It's almost like they're our friend. It's like for me, it was a conflict of two. You know, one side was I know what they've done is wrong and all these things, but then there's the other point of oh, they were so kind to me. You know, they did this, they did that, and it's like that's kind of what they do. That's the power they wield over us, and it makes it very difficult to articulate that to somebody else.
Absolutely. And I went to her for meals for the weekend. I was involved with her in out of school activities. Like I was working full time, giving my all to the school and everything she wanted me to do. And then there's this hideous abuse going on as well. And I don't even think I realized when I confirmed with that social worker, yes, because she abused me too. I had no idea what was being set in motion by doing that. Absolutely no idea. It was just the yes came out so quickly because it was someone asking me, did she abuse you or whatever language she used? And I confirmed. And then within 3 days, she was gone
So is that how was that the first time you disclosed? Is that how it happened? Someone came to you
on the phone.
on the someone else.
Someone just asked me,
So
is it true that Marco Life abused you? And that was yes. And she was gone.
so someone else reported her.
Not to the police, no, to the school board or to
Oh,
the school lawyers or whatever. Yeah.
and how did it move to the stage to police?
She left. I went back to work as if nothing had changed in my life. Nothing has shifted. Had my second child, had my third child. They were all born pretty close to each other. And my youngest sister, the youngest of us three, went to the police
Yeah.
in early 2011. And she had the courage with her boyfriend to go and give a police statement. She did it first, my second sister 6 months later, and then myself a few months later after that. And again, took a week off work because I didn't understand why I was mentally, emotionally feeling horrific. Still had no connection, no words, nothing, no support. Went to the police alone, didn't talk to anyone, no therapy, had three little young children, fourth on the way, and went back to work.
How did you find the police when you gave your statements?
Um, my sisters had a great experience with an incredible detective, the one who actually went and picked Lifer up from the other from Israel. I myself, I think it was so traumatizing. I have no memory of it.
Yeah, I can relate to that. You know, my last case, I had a really good detective, but earlier on with the Woodrow Commission, it was, I almost felt like I was on trial. It's, you know, that's how it kind of felt. And you and I both know we were subjected to the laws governing time of abuse, which meant the cases were a lot more difficult to process. Can we talk a little bit about how your cases went? Because you went through a similar thing where your abuser took off overseas like mine, right?
Yes, yes. So she left the country in 2008 and she did everything in her power to avoid justice. And my sisters and I, at some point, we gave our statements in 2011 and we just years and years and years just waited and waited and waited for her to be extradited. Years and years. I cannot even explain the emotional turmoil and the roller coaster we had for that many court hearings. By the time she came back, it was over 74, and we lived through every single one live. We had people going to court there to update us. Her mental health tricks were of another level. It was obvious to everyone that she was having inside help, but no one could prove it. And then finally, 2017, my sister came out with her story I think it was the Australian, an incredible story. And a couple months later, we started campaigning hard and we were like, we are going to bring her back. We don't care. We've waited since 2011. It's now 2017. We are going to bring her back. And we went to Israel once in 2017. We met with Rape Crisis Center. We met with members of parliament. We met with anyone and everyone that we could meet with. We went again a year later. We did the same thing again. And we said to the prosecutor, there is evidence that there's corruption.
Yeah.
Someone is helping her.
The judicial system is a myriad of trash. It's so hard to negate. You're talking to the one person who literally understands what you're talking about. I mean, I know that wait. I waited a decade for them to bring my abuser back, and then COVID hit, so I had to wait all through the COVID period while he was kept in custody in the Netherlands. And so I get it, and I know the fight. Right, the fight you have in you is the fight I have in me. It's just like that. You know, we know we've been wronged. And then what makes it even harder is being wronged is when the system continually wrongs us, you know, where you feel like you're not just fighting against our abuser, we're fighting against a system that's so flawed, you know, and these cases are hardest to prosecute because they're often he said, she said cases, which makes it one of the hardest of all to prosecute. Would you agree?
Absolutely. And also that it was that amount of time since the abuse happened, since she had left the country. It was like I said, like I'm now 40. She started the abuse when I was 15 and a half. Trial was only 3 years ago.
Yeah.
Think about that distance of time. That's like insane amount of time. And we finally managed to uncover that there was corruption happening from the very highest level of government, that the health minister, the deputy health minister, was involved in pressuring psychiatrists to make false reports. It was unbelievable, but it was also so we were vindicated. It was like we knew this was happening. No one believed us, but look what happens when you find out the truth. And she was arrested finally for obstruction of justice. That should have made it simple on the next plane. No chance. It was another 2 whole years until she came back to Australia.
What makes your case unique is that it's a woman on child abuse, which we don't seem to talk enough about. You know, we always see it as middle-aged men who are abusing children, and people don't understand that it's not um, secluded to one sex. It's both ways, right?
Absolutely. And I do highlight female perpetrators whenever I see them come up in the news because there's still, and I will say, even going through the legal system 3 years ago, I still feel that this is still a severe misunderstanding around the trauma and abuse that a female perpetrator can do. In a way, emotionally, even worse than a man, because women are seen as nurturers, as caregivers, as warm people. And so all the abuse is hidden under that complex layer of attachment and nurturing. So we really have to give give a lot of understanding to victims of female perpetrators, male or female victims, because there are so many males who are too embarrassed and ashamed to come forward
Yeah.
with a female perpetrator.
I often see cases online where a female abuses a male, or a female abuses a female, and often that people don't they make all these comments that are quite disturbing, really. Like it's almost like, oh, I don't even want to say some of them because they're so horrible. You know what I mean? But I don't think people understand. It's not about it's actually about the shift in power. It's about one person holding a position of power over another, and the way that that leaves one feeling, especially when you get to an age of reason, where an age of understanding, where we start to understand what's actually happened, and you think, wow, and you realize that your whole childhood's been stolen by this person.
Not just my childhood, but also so many other years of just campaigning for justice, as you would know as well.
Yes.
So much of our life for justice.
Yeah. 1996, I first gave evidence in the Woodrow Commission, and he was arrested in 2019. So you understand, trust me, I get it. I do. And I got to a point where I sat on a lounge for a decade with such a deep-rooted depression because I thought the system, like you, people behind the system were actually the ones that were causing this to happen. They were excuses, or you hear, right, is it can't happen for this reason or for that reason. And let's talk about the moment you found out she was coming home.
Okay, so I still look at that sometimes because for me, imagine fighting a battle that so many over time have this compassion fatigue or have this growing realization that she's never going to come back.
Yeah.
So we're not just fighting systems across countries. We're also fighting the belief of people that don't feel she can come back. So when I flew to Israel early 2020, because it was 2 days I went by myself for the first time without my sisters, which I was very struggling mentally, intensely. It was awful to be by myself. It was so intense. It was so much hanging on it. That day was the deciding factor, those 2 days in court. If the 3 psychiatrists that were brave enough to say she is mentally fit to stand trial were going to be brutally cross-examined, I was going to sit there and be there. It was a decision I made in 24 hours. I called my husband and said, I'm going to Israel for the next court hearings. It's too important. One of us has to be there. And he's like, okay. And I got a really cheap ticket because right before beginning of COVID, and I got there. And I sat in court for 2 whole days. Manny Wax was there supporting me. I didn't have my sisters, so he actually came to court for those 2 whole days as well. And it was different language. I couldn't really understand, but it's my story, so I understood some of it. And I saw those psychiatrists not buckle. I saw them withstand the most brutal cross-examination. I had been to many court hearings, all the other trips we went to Israel already. And it gave me hope. Yeah. And I got home. I only went for 5 days. I felt horrific. The other 3 days I was in bed. I could not move. Yeah. I got home, and within a couple months, we got the news that she's fit to be extradited. It was the most surreal moment in our life. She's coming. She's coming back. And anyone and everyone that had said to us she won't come back, she had said she will never come back. It was like, we did this. She is coming back, and we still didn't know when. It was still months. It wasn't until January 2021 when she came back, the last flight out of Israel before COVID closed the skies. We were incredibly lucky with that. That when she got on that plane, my whole world shifted. It felt like a full circle in a way, because for years we had had people proving that she won't come back. We were fighting systems that we didn't even know we were fighting. And she actually got on that plane, handcuffs in legs and hands, and everyone saw that. And she was actually coming back. But you know what was the best part? We had the prosecution team in Israel and the prosecution team in Australia look at us and say, if you hadn't done what you had done, she would not be back. So they gave us the credit that, yes, all the other moving pieces, the governments, the premiers, the prime ministers, all the people we met along the way that stepped up and spoke about it, raised awareness between the two countries. But because of our constant fight and raising awareness and speaking to all the people that we possibly could speak to, she came back. We did not allow anything she was doing to stop us from seeking justice.
Can I just say I really struggled through all that to hold my own emotions, because I actually felt every minute of that, because I relate to that. You literally, it's just like the same thing, that power. Please tell me you have footage of her getting on the plane and being brought back to Australia, because I want to insert right here, because that is powerful.
One picture
Yeah.
that some guard on the tarmac just was like, oh, this is a big story, because there's this woman going up the stairs, snap, it went viral. Every news talker, I posted it, everyone was like, this picture of her, they have no idea how important it was to take that picture, because you might know this from your case, we weren't allowed to know when she was coming back. We weren't going to, the prosecutor said, I can't tell you, I'm sorry.
So I got lucky. So what actually happened with mine, I was actually sitting at home with that depression I was talking about, and my phone rang, and it was the detective in my case, Nick, and he says, "Hey, Glenn." He said, "How you doing?" I said, "Good." He said, "I just wanted to let you know that when you turn on the news tonight, you're probably going to see this everywhere. I'm actually at the Netherlands airport. I'm just walking onto the plane with your abuser, and he's about to come." I'm going to be upset. Come back into the country. And after decades, of waiting, so I get it. Trust me, I get it. That fight, the fear, the fear it's not going to happen. The fight, the determination to make it happen. The need for everybody, right, to know. And so I get it, Nicole. Probably better than anyone out there listening, because I went through it, and it is frustrating. It is, but it's relief. But it's such a beautiful moment. Let's talk about court, when you finally got to go into court. And I can imagine you were a warrior in court. And I'm I want to hear a bit about the court case.
So I don't know why I echoed, sorry. I was really looking forward to court. Now, I know that's going to sound weird, but when you're fighting for justice for that long and that moment feels unreachable, when that moment comes, you are ready for it, because you have fought for this through children growing up, going overseas, leaving family behind, emotional pain and suffering, through corruption at the highest level. This is not the scariest part. It is scary, but it's not the part that you fear the most. You fear the most that you will never get that chance. The chance is here. So now what can I do about it? I remember the first meeting we had with the Crown Prosecutor, and I came with a list of questions. At the end of that meeting, I impressed him, because he knew that I was prepared, and I cracked a smile out of this really serious QC that was a male, and he was like so up there. He's now a judge, by the way. He became a judge after our case, and he's going to be a great judge. And it was knowledge, again, power. So it was really all our experiences of courts that we had been to. We had even attended a court hearing in America supporting another survivor. We had been through civil cases. We had, different courts we had been involved in. All that knowledge we had taken with us to ask all the questions we needed to know. And we felt, even so, my sisters and I all say, no matter how much we thought we knew, we were still unprepared, because the courts is nothing like you can ever imagine until you're in it, no matter how much you know.
Yeah.
And the power you feel you have, I'm going to have my day in court and I'm going to get to say my truth, is so not accurate. The court, what you can say is so prescribed, so specific, so locked into a very specific amount. I had a third of my statement redacted a week before trial. And the mess that caused me, I almost dropped the case. I almost said, I can't do this. I'm not going. I called the first time ever, the prosecutor and barrister and social worker saw me so activated emotionally, because I'm someone that keeps my emotions pretty tight. And I said to them, you can't do this to me. I cannot go to trial if you've taken page after page, blank bits out and telling me I can't talk on any of those things or it will be a mistrial. Why didn't you tell me this 3 months ago when the trial was pushed off? We had trial booked in August 2022 and it got pushed off the day before trial started to February 2023. So I was so thrown from that. But again, I pushed through.
You
I
know,
pushed through.
as a child, you got no voice. As you're waiting for her to get brought back to the country, you've got no voice. You get told you're going to court and you're like, I'm about to get my voice. And then what happens is they say, we can let you have your voice, but only a part of it. Again, I get it. You know, like, did she plead guilty or not, or did she fight it through?
No, she never pled guilty. She's never said guilty her whole life.
Do you know what happens? So, I've had several trials against abusers, and in one of the cases, what happens is they do what's called so what happens if they plead guilty? What happens is they negotiate the solicitors for the perp and the solicitors for the victim, and they do what's called agreed upon facts. And then what happens is that it gets redacted, right? So from 18 charges, it gets whatever it is, it gets brought down, and then they agree, well, yes, this happened and that happened. Well, I'll agree that bit happened, but that bit didn't. And then the police and that, they all nut it out. You as the victim have no voice until they do.
Absolutely not.
Yeah. And then when it goes before the judge actually hears a condensed version of what's actually happened. And so I feel you on that. I really do. So what was the reasons for redactions? And can you say those redactions now?
So I'll start off by saying that Mark Khalifa was extradited on 74 charges.
Yeah.
That's a lot.
Yes.
I gave further statements once she came back because I had work on therapy and I was recovering some more memories and I was able to actually feel into the fact that I'd been abused because I so dissociated from it for so many years. And I gave some more statements. So she actually got lifted up to 92 charges because there were a lot more charges put on her original statement.
Yeah.
Then, as you know, the prosecution took it and condensed it down to 29 charges. 92 down to 29. Why? Because a jury can't be overloaded. Shocking. We overloaded. We had the abuse perpetrated upon us. We went through all of that.
Yeah.
Why can't the jury get to hear everything we went through?
Yeah.
They condense it, they group it, they make a whole year become one charge rather than multiple incidents because it's too much for the jury. During trial, 2 charges were very technical issues happened. So 2 charges got dropped. So it went down to 27. What part got dropped for me? The day I got married onwards was completely non-negotiable, not allowed to talk about at all. And there were some very severe parts of abuse that happened and even more betrayal of trust in that time. Could not even mention a day. Not a single witness, the entire 6-week trial was allowed to say a word about her fleeing to Israel. If they did, there would have been a mistrial. So when the defense lawyer asked in a very obviously snide way, why did it take so long from when you gave your statement or from when the abuse happened till the trial or some silly question like that, everyone rolled their eyes because we all know why, but we're not allowed to say. So it was so precarious. On the first day, the defense lawyer tried to get the trial thrown out because some paper had printed in Israel about the news and someone had printed it out and brought it to the courtroom. The judge dismissed it and said, nothing came out here that wasn't allowed to. We are carrying on. But there was that, because the case was so high profile, because there was contamination, as in it was 3 sisters and no other victims, because it had been so highly publicized, they had to get a huge jury pool. And it was so tight. Everything was run so tight for fear that one thing could set off the whole trial to become a mistrial. It was terrifying in that regard. And I only got 5 charges. I, who was abused for 6.5 years out of the 7, the most out of all my sisters, got whittled down to 5 charges. Yeah. I didn't get a chance to even be found guilty or not guilty. It feels like I was so invalidated by how little I was allowed to talk about. And that's what's a part of the trial that's very painful for me, that particular part.
And again, I relate. Mine was reduced down to 3. So I get it. And look, it's really important you hear this. This is why your voice is so powerful now and my voice. I feel a duty to educate Australia and the world really on these things and also put forward to the system the changes that need to be made, because it is hard enough, Nicole, as you know, going through what you went through all of the waiting, all of the court processes, and then to keep having it diminished and having you yourself diminished, you know what I mean? And it's like taking away your power, right?
Absolutely. And at the same time, Glenn, if any survivor asks me, would you do it again? Because for anyone who doesn't know and is listening to this podcast now, at the end of the trial, Mark was found guilty on 18 charges out of the 27. Unfortunately, my five charges were found not guilty. And for anyone who asks me, would you do it again? My answer is always absolutely yes. And why? Because going through trial, first of all, receiving that opportunity is not a given. We know so many cases get dropped. So that's firstly.
Yeah.
Secondly, going through trial, regardless of the outcome, brings accountability to the perpetrator, raises awareness, shows the world that us as survivors will not be silenced despite the outcome. So even if I went through court all over again and got a not guilty at the end, I would still do it again, because I know how powerful it is even to have a diminished voice, because it brings a level of accountability to the perpetrator that they're not admitting and they're not taking responsibility for, but we are putting it onto them by going through trial.
And it takes a lot of strength. One of the most common messages I get with people is when they share their story with me and they say, I want to do something, but I don't have the strength to do it. And that's why it's really important that people hear what you just said then, is, because even if that's what they're afraid of, right? Is they get to the end result and they don't get the result they want. But there's still accountability in that. There's still some kind of power to you in that, right?
Absolutely. And when there was, after receiving not guilty and I was so broken, I did not want her to see that she broke me. So during the plea hearing where everyone could give a victim impact statement, like my sisters and one of my sister's husbands, and I couldn't, that was horrific for me. It was like I was completely dismissed from the case. I sat there throughout that hearing and kept turning to her and staring her down. Like, she might think that she beat me because I received not guilty, as in like she won with me, but I'm not going to let her think that, because she hasn't. I've said my truth, and I will continue to say my truth outside of the court system, because the courts did not give me the opportunity to say my whole truth.
Yeah.
So that was a powerful moment for me, to look at her and not be afraid, not be submissive, not feel she still has power, because I'm not sure if you feel like this, Glenn, but I know other survivors might feel this. Even years after we've had abuse perpetrated against us, there can be times where we are triggered or activated and we feel the power of the perpetrator.
Yeah.
We feel that they're in our minds. We feel they're in our rooms, that we feel that their power still can control our mind. And it's a lot of active work to say, no, they're not controlling us now, their impact, and to not let them impact us as much. But that's something that doesn't just happen the day after court or the day after receiving not guilty. That's years and years of work.
I relate to it a lot. My abuse is about to get out in 4 weeks after doing a 10-year sentence, and I've been struggling with it myself, Nicole. So I get it. And I work so hard, as you have, is to not allow them to live rent free in our head. And I found my voice. You found your voice, and I get it. But there are those moments where I don't have the same strength from day to day, and when I'm vulnerable with something else, that tends to jump in, if that makes sense. Do you find that?
Yes, definitely. Absolutely. And I can fully admit that there's still not a day that goes by that I don't think of her. I'm waiting for that time to happen. But you know what? I'm grateful if I have 2 hours where I don't think of her.
Yeah.
And that's something that I'm working on to increase. As much as I don't want her to be in my head, and even someone commented on my TikTok video and they're like, "We ever stop saying her name?" And I thought that was so interesting. And I was like, actually saying her name is powerful.
Yeah.
It doesn't trigger me to say her name or to see a picture of her, because I'm in my healing part of my journey. I'm not surviving her now. I am healing from her now. So I look at her and I see what she's done. I don't blame myself as much. So yes, and when I am feeling vulnerable about, like you said, other things, then definitely the past creeps in and weaves in with that. Yes, that's how it works.
I absolutely believe that the more we share our story, the more it loses our power over us. I know for myself, and I can only speak for myself, is that I internalized it for so long. I was so afraid to speak about it. I had this shame and guilt attached to my story. And I've learned that the more I articulate what's happened and say the names of my abusers, that it actually reduces the power that they hold over us. And that's another important lesson for people listening in, diminish yourself. Don't reduce your story or keep it all inside. Get it out, and I just want to add to this. Expectations lead to resentments. So don't have expectations on how it's received. Because if we expect the person to go, oh, or whatever it is we're expecting from them, it doesn't always happen that way, right?
Absolutely. It's really about us doing that for ourselves and not for other people. And it's not that we're trying to make other people comfortable or uncomfortable. It's about doing our healing journey in our own way. And sometimes that can be uncomfortable and cause discomfort for others. And that's okay.
Yeah.
Like you said, not managing, not expecting anything from others, but doing it for ourselves, not for others.
Let's talk about Nicole today, mate, because you're doing some wonderful stuff. You just went to National Survivors Day and spoke at Parliament House, right? Tell me a bit about that.
So I became involved with National Survivors Day in 2023. Then I just visited there for the first time, and I became an ambassador in 2024. And I didn't know what an ambassador meant. And I actually stood in Parliament with the current Prime Minister, Anthony Albanese, and he had actually been in the opposition when we were campaigning, and his party had released a statement of support with us, even more in a way than what Scott Morrison had done at the time. And it felt very supportive of us. It actually felt like a full circle moment to be meeting him at the other end of the journey a couple years later. And I actually remember National Survivors Day that second year. I felt after trial, it was so hard for me to know where I was in the world because I got not guilty. Almost like I was ashamed to show my face because I don't deserve to be a survivor. It was a very, very, very hard couple of months to get out of. But when I became an ambassador, I fully accepted the title survivor. And it's like, I remember my sister saying to me, you can't say today I actually feel like I'm a survivor because we've been speaking about the campaign and we've been on the media, we've done a documentary for so many years already. And I said, I know. But right now, I feel like a survivor. I actually am connected to my feelings of I actually can admit I am a survivor. It was such a defining moment. And that was the beginning of my healing because it wasn't third person. It wasn't it happened. I wasn't talking about what will happen. I actually acknowledged I am a survivor. And from then, I just went from strength to strength. I started speaking out on TikTok very hesitantly. And I really started talking about topics that I feel that many survivors can't talk on. And it wasn't hard for me to because it was my healing and I knew I was helping others. And then so many victim survivors reached out to me on Instagram, on TikTok. I've met so many in person. Even this morning, I called a lawyer for another victim survivor to do the first phone call for them to see if they'll take her case after speaking to her for an hour and a half yesterday, to hear her story and to understand what she's going through. And that's the kind of work I do that we don't see online. And I know, Glenn, that you're like this as well. All those phone conversations, text message check-ins, calling people for other people, referring people to certain places and services. That's all the stuff that we don't show on social media that we do is supporting quietly other survivors as well, because we know what that support would mean to us. And having the opportunity to speak in Parliament and to be part of National Centre for Child Safety and do some videos for them and really be a voice that hopefully survivors can see and feel growth and hope, not just victim and pain and trauma, because that's all still there, but they can coexist. I'm not saying to myself, I'm not traumatized, I'm not struggling, I don't still deal with certain very hard feelings, or I don't still have sleepless nights. I fully admit all that happens. But at the same time, I can also acknowledge that I am growing, healing, finding my voice, positive moments, and really working towards a path where it's only upwards, even if there's little dips downwards on the way, because that's normal in healing. I don't judge myself harshly anymore for having those hard days. I can just acknowledge I've got a wave right now that I've got to ride, and then I know that I will get up again, and I have. And this year I spoke in New South Wales Parliament and Victorian Parliament, and I felt even stronger than I did last year. And last year I thought I was in a good place already, so I can see the difference. And it also helped that my sisters and I put out a documentary with Stan that they filmed us for 5 years through the journey of finding justice, but also the trial.
Yeah.
There's so rarely a documentary that goes through trial while it's live. And you see the pain and trauma of going through trial, but you see the strength after as well. It's a very real, raw documentary. And the feedback we've gotten from people is that it's very intense, but it's also hopeful. And it's a beautiful documentary. And I feel that anyone that watches it and any survivor that sees it can identify with all the emotions that we have in there, because we all go through them different, like same emotions, but differently how it presents in each person. And there's hope at the end of all of that.
I think
If we're willing. work in.
Absolutely. I think something that's really important that you said is that you didn't feel like a survivor because you didn't get the validation through the court. And it's important that people watching on don't misconstrue and understand that a survivor is someone that's been through that story, and the only validation they need is self. And that's what you've learned. That's what I've learned is to that,
Yes.
you know what you went through, you know your story. And that's what gives you the power, the voice today. Like the voiceless as a child has now got risen, like the phoenix, and I love that. I love that you found that voice to help others. You see that in others and have the empathy for others that are going through it, because there's so many people out there, Nicole, that are really struggling, who have never got justice in any way, and so they don't feel complete. And you're living proof that you can still feel complete. You know what I mean? It's just by finding your voice, by finding that self validation, and does that make sense?
Yes, and that's something that I said in one of my speeches in Parliament. I said, even if you can just acknowledge to yourself that you are a survivor,
Yeah,
that is the first step.
yeah.
If you then feel safe enough to share with a safe person, a therapist, a partner, then that is also just enough. And if you never want to share it, that's also okay. But take the acknowledgement for yourself, I am a survivor, even if you just say it quietly, because that is a step, that's a shift.
Yeah, absolutely. That's exactly what it is. So what other things are you doing today? What have you got planned going forward?
So I've done a lot of podcasts. This past year has been very intense with the documentary coming out and all the advocacy work. Going forward into 2026, we are doing some impact work with the documentary. So we have aligned with Australian Childhood Foundation and with You We Can, two organizations from two different angles. We have chosen 5 key points from the documentary on what we want to work on and create some change, informed change, awareness. So that's just at the very beginning stages, but we've had 2 meetings and it's looking very hopeful, and hopefully some big things will come from this space. And of course, I will share when they do. As well, I started this past year to study law, and that was really driven from my desire to help survivors from within the system, to really be in there as a lived experience person, to really understand and walk alongside survivors and advocate for them within the role within the system. And I remember the last day that we left court with the prosecuting team and everyone, the prosecutor turned around and said to us, my sisters and I, she was like, you probably never want to see court again. And my sisters were like, no. And I was like, I want to be here every day. So my passion for law was reawoken during the trial, which is such a traumatizing time.
Yeah, it is.
It's a passion I had since I was 18 and I forgot about because those options weren't even available for me. And that passion got reawoken. So after a year of 2024 that I absolutely couldn't do it, 2025, even in the busiest year of my life, I signed up and I started to do a pathway course to get into a Bachelor of Law. And I've done 2 units and I hope to continue more in 2026. And together that will probably take up a lot of my life, but I'll still continue my advocacy work. I've become a board member with National Survivors Foundation.
Yep.
So as well, I might be still talking in parliaments or any other events that they might ask me to come along and do some speaking. And I'll still be supporting survivors on the side. Like I said, the phone call this morning and any other of that kind of silent work that we do a lot of, but we don't need to always share on socials because of privacy for survivors and because it's work that we do because we're passionate about helping others. I think the biggest thing as a survivor for myself is I wish I could support every single survivor, and I want to. And I want to always be available. But I've also learned to make boundaries and to tell people that reach out to me. Of course, you can ask questions and you can send messages, and I'll get back to you tonight or tomorrow or when I next get a chance. And sometimes I'm like, I can just do voice notes because it's too hard and too long to type. Are you comfortable with that? And I just reply like that. And that way I've managed my boundaries around not being overextended in my support work. And that takes time to learn as well, because no one teaches us those boundaries when we're young, especially not if we're in an abusive household.
I hear you, Matt, and I appreciate the conversation we had yesterday. It's literally been my problem at the moment is that I'm overextended. I have such a reach like you. So many people reach out to me. Like you said, no one sees what we do off the ball. They see what we do on social media. They don't see the behind closed doors, the many conversations we have with people offloading their stuff to us. But let me just say, you being a lawyer, we need survivor lawyers. We need people who have actually walked a mile in those shoes, so that when we have someone come through the door, we like I did when I'm watching you, everything you share with me, I know that. I recognize that. I've been there. I get it. You know what I mean? You get it. And so then it's a comfort to the person sitting on the other side when they say, I know Nicole's been through this. So Nicole knows how I'm feeling at this moment, where I'm seated, where I'm heading, and And it's good to be able to explain it to them, the process sometimes, because I didn't find that. It's just sort of, here it is, you're at court. And I same with you, I had Channel 7 and Channel 9, and I had Current Affair, they were literally in court with me as I'm going through court. And it's like, it felt like I was just I don't even know how to explain it. Almost felt like it was surreal. Like I was outside looking in, watching on as this big thing went on around me. And inside they forget also the child, and that's something that I've started to understand now, is the little boy as opposed to the man I am now. And like you, I've just actually spoken to to corrective services in relation to going to the jail to speak to my abuser. I want him to see the man, you know what I mean? Not the little boy. So all those things I think are important.
Yes, and I would be very curious if you actually can do that, Glenn, because something that I have not spoken about much because many people understand this and misunderstand this, take it the wrong way. More than anything, I want a chance to have a conversation with Mark Khalifa.
Yeah.
More than anything. And it's something that is such a deep desire within me, and I don't know if I'll ever have it because the perpetrator has to be willing to have the conversation as well in the restorative justice process. So if you're able to have that conversation, I am behind you because I know what it will mean for you and your healing and your closure to have that. Yes, of course, it'll impact you, but at the same time, it will also give you something. And I understand what that will give you. So I hope if that's something you want, I really hope you can get that option.
Yeah, so I want people to hear this little bit because it's important other people who have been through this process understand the mistakes that I've made. So the mistake I made was I was reached out to by parole and that about a year ago and told that he's going through the process now to get parole and you've got all these rights. One of those rights would have been able to go into the prison and talk to him. I said to them, I just want 3 words said to him: I forgive you. And I know a lot of people looking on are like, why would you do that? It wasn't about him. This is about me. This is about saying you no longer live rent-free in my head. But then I revisited it when they rang me up and they said he's been given parole and he's coming out. And I was like, I want my voice. I said, can I please speak to him? They said, oh, we have to go through this process now. He now needs to agree to that process. Prior to that, there was an option for me to be able to do that as part of his ability to get parole. I didn't know that. And that's not explained to me. Like no one explained that that was an option for me. They just said, what would you like to do? I think that if we could teach the system to say, look, these are your options. This is what's available to you and better articulate that to us, because it's a shock in itself, knowing your abuser's about to get out, right? So I hope for you that you get that voice, And I mean, look, at the very minimum, even writing a letter, Nicole, could be just as not as powerful because I know what you want. You want to look them in the eye, right? You want to show them that you're not broken. That I get it. I get it.
But for me, and I'll just share this, writing a letter would probably be way too triggering. And I'll tell you why. In court in 2023, they pulled out 2 letters I had written to Mark Khalifa when I was 19. So literally over 20 years ago, Mark Khalifa kept this letter I had written to her in my first year of teaching to thank her for her help and for putting a smile on my face. And they made me read that out in court and answer questions on that. So that really screwed with my head. Why did she keep that letter? Did she know she was going to get caught one day and have to prove that I was in a relationship with her or liked her or anything like that to disprove the fact that abuse can be happening even if the person is still on good terms with you? It was awful. So the thought of me giving a letter that she has the power to hold on to, like I do not even want to give her that power. But I do know that other people have mentioned that is an option. It's just not one I would want to do. I think sometimes meeting someone face to face with not even with many words can be so incredibly powerful for the survivor. One thing as well I can share, because last night it just got confirmed, there will be a premiere of our documentary in the US, in Atlanta. And my sisters and I are flying then in February, which is in 5 weeks. We just booked tickets last night because the company, organizations funded us to be able to go for this premiere. And we will be in Atlanta having our documentary aired and shown for the first time in North America.
And you're going to send me something about that because I want to post that on all my socials too, as make sure that people know. What's the name of the documentary?
Interesting. Surviving Mark Khalifa.
Beautiful. I love that. And I just want to go backwards a little bit. I forgot. I knew that would happen to me. We were just talking about something and I forgot what it was. And I really wanted to, what we were just talking about before this. Oh, the letter. the dynamics. What I want to talk about is that the complexities that people don't understand is the dynamic between a survivor and a perpetrator is very complex, right? And I really think it's a discussion that we need to have, because I I would go as far as to say at one point in my childhood, I loved my abuser. And I'm not saying as a partner would love a partner. I just had such an admiration. This guy was connected to really high profile people. He was very articulate. He was very intelligent. He gave me what I perceived at the time as love, you know what I mean? A lot of care. So we get this kind of dynamic where, like you said, you write them this letter and like you're appreciative of us because we're still not quite mindful of what actually has happened. You know, we're still in that power imbalance, right?
I have pictures of her on my wedding day with me
Yeah.
one on one
Yeah.
on my wedding day, on a day that she also assaulted me.
Yeah.
Like the dissociation and disconnect when there is that power imbalance and when there is that control and when there is that abuse, it's very real.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of survivors can resonate with that.
Yeah.
That it's very hard to break free. And then especially if you don't even know what's happening to you.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I think that yeah, I really have an interest around that dynamic because I think there's a lot of abuse. I know coming forward, one of my abusers in court said, "I can't believe he did. So I really love Glenn." You know, like every one of them suddenly loved me in court. Like I loved Glenn, you know, and it's like, no, that's not love, bro. That's abuse. That's abuse, you know, and even for them, like they turn into a victim in court. And it's like it's quite powerful moment really when you see like one wouldn't even come on how he would come on screen, wouldn't come to actual court, and I was robbed of that ability to look them in the eye, you know.
Bear him down. Yeah.
Yeah, did you go through
Mark, like I did not the sentencing. She actually did not come for sentencing. I was quite upset about that.
Me too. Yeah, that's exactly what I was talking about, the sentencing, the part where we've got the power, you know. Another thing, I don't know, did you read out an impact statement?
I had no ability to, but I have read it out.
Cool.
It's pretty graphic in 7 parts on TikTok. That was a year after I received not guilty. That was my turning moment into healing. It took me a whole year to be able to do it. And I said on April 3rd, 2024, I went to a hotel in the city, the one that we had stayed in during court.
Yeah.
So it was very the same everything. And I sat there and I read over 2 hours. It's not 2 hours long, but it took me 2 hours to read through 7 parts of my victim impact statement, post it up there, knowing that it's super vulnerable, super graphic, going into detail about the impact of the abuse and what it's caused in my life. But it was so healing because that was robbed from me from court because I received not guilty. So I was not going to allow her to take that away from me.
Let's talk about healing. Okay, I really want to. So what sort of things have you had to do post trial to work on your healing? I know the first one is finding your voice, and that is powerful.
Yeah, I think for me, it took me a long time to even realize I was healing. I think that's what it is as well, because for years and years and years in my life, I was so dissociated from my feelings. I thought I was robotic. I thought I didn't have any feelings. I did. I could look back and say, oh, yeah, I absolutely did. None of that at all impacted my children because thankfully with my children, unfiltered love, unfiltered feelings, unfiltered ability to emotionally attach and to be able to bring them up, that never impacted. I'm so grateful for that. But for myself, I completely ignored myself. For years and years, myself didn't exist.
Yeah.
I was a mum. I only existed for my children. I never existed for myself.
Yeah.
It literally took the verdict that broke that barrier and allowed emotion to come through. Once emotion came through, that's when I was able to start healing.
Yeah.
That's when the behaviors didn't turn to suicidal ideation or self-harm or binge eating or eating disorders, all the behaviors that were suppressing emotion.
Yeah.
Once the emotion was able to come to the surface, then healing was able to start. But I didn't see it straight away. I did a lot of journaling, and there's a huge power in emptying out the brain, even if you don't read over it, even if it's not perfect, however it comes out, even if you never read it again. I journaled furiously during trial in the year before that, and I don't have the power yet, the strength to go back and read such a horrible time that it was. And journaling was one. And then also recognizing, I just went away last week with my family. I went to the Sunshine Coast for a couple of days. What is the one thing I recognized from the whole entire trip? I walked outside and I felt anonymous. I felt no one watching me. I didn't feel any triggers. I didn't feel anyone knew me. I didn't see a soul actually on the road that we were on. It was so quiet, and I was so grateful for that.
Yeah.
But that is something I would have not been able to be grateful for a year ago.
Yeah.
So that for me was evidence of my healing. So a lot of times people think big movements, big changes, big shifts is what means you're healing and you're getting better. But that's just the societal judgment and expectation of you. And it's not that. It's tiny little things that you actually acknowledge, clock away, and be like, okay, I'm seeing things differently now. Okay, I'm dealing with that particular different trigger differently now. I'm able to sit with uncomfortable feelings, but I can get up and continue. Wow, I didn't used to be able to do that. I would turn to any amount of other behaviors to stuff those feelings down. That is how I figured out healing.
Yeah.
And because of that, I'm able to speak and share and support without being triggered because I'm able to manage and regulate myself. I'm not looking for external things to regulate me and to help me feel better. So I found that having coffee is just a comfort because it's a warm drink, but it's a self-care thing and it gives me joy. Just even for half an hour, journaling, nature. I think everyone will find different specific things that will help them feel positive and connected to themselves.
Yeah.
That is, those little tiny moments is what is healing.
I writing stuff down for me was the huge one. It was my first time because I struggle to articulate it to out verbally. So, but writing it down, I was able to really write well. I wrote poems, all sorts of things, and it was almost like that's where I found my relief. And interestingly, you talk about finding emotions. I didn't know what emotions were. I only knew one emotion. It was anger. And when I started to learn that that was actually a secondary emotion to something much deeper, and I was able to start to realize what emotion went where and why, and able to connect that emotion with what was going on, it really was a game changer for me. And it's interesting you talk about self-healing because the best therapy I've gotten has been self-healing. It's been looking inwards and being in those still moments and being able to say, you know what, that happened, but I'm okay. I'm safe now. And the rising of the power in myself, the voice, like you've found it yourself, that, like, yes, that happened, but look at who I am now. Look what I do now. Nicole, is there anything in your story that you would like to share that I have left out or we haven't spoken about?
I think we've had a pretty good conversation.
I,
I think for me, I'm not sure why it's echoing, sorry. I think for me, it's always something very important for me to say that anyone that listens and is a silent survivor, I acknowledge because I always feel, and whenever I speak to a room full of people or any gatherings, that in that room, there will be many silent survivors who have never disclosed, who will never disclose, who are silenced for many different reasons, or who have too much shame. And I want anyone, when I talk, to know that I am acknowledging that there are silent survivors. And that it's so important to remember that when we have conversations where some of us can speak out and some of us can't.
can I just say to you, Nicole, before we end, I want to thank you for your courage, not just in coming and speaking today, but in fighting and standing up and being a voice for women and all survivors. And we need people like you who are articulate and who are able to um, have empathy for what's going on for others. I like you, I see it everywhere I go. And sometimes it can be overwhelming, but I still try and find space for others because I just know how desperate. I remember, I just want to share this real quickly. A couple of years ago when I first got on social media, I saw someone share a story about being a survivor and I was like, oh, I got to tell them. And so I got on and I wrote a novel. Literally, I wrote them this novel. I'm like, and then they didn't answer it, right? And I was like, how dare they not? I wrote all this stuff. It's so important. And now what I do, and I open up some of my messages, I'm like, oh no, it's a novel. And then sometimes I don't read it straight away. And then I sit there and I get the guilt. So I'm like, I got to go back and find that message. And then I read it, So I get it. And I'm kind of glad that happened to me because it made me know how I felt in that moment when I wasn't heard. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Yeah. So thank you, Nicole, so much for coming on and chatting with us. And hopefully we chat again. And who knows, we could be standing beside each other one day speaking at some event.
Yeah, I hope so.
Yeah,
Yes.
absolutely. Right. Thank you, Nicole.
Thanks, man.
All right. Just before you go, can you send me that photo of her getting on the plane? Is that possible?
Oh, and the trailer for the documentary?
Yeah. Yes, please. And I'll make sure I include those because we'll get as much eyes on it as we can. I think that like having a documentary that actually shows the process in itself and and the myriad of emotions that we go through the trial. It's taxing, man. I remember coming home from my trials because I was subjected, like I said, I had to go through trials that went for weeks, and I would come
Yes.
home and I'd be like, woof, and then I get up the next morning and you try and get yourself up again, and then the next night you woof, and it was so much. But anyway, thank you, Nicole, and I appreciate you. And I'll give you a ring later, and not tonight, but in the next couple of days if you're free, and we'll have a chat about this and when it's going to happen. It'll come out next Tuesday.
Sounds good.
All right. Talk soon, Nicole.
Thanks,
Thank
man.
you, mate. Appreciate you.